Maya had been single long enough to stop counting in months. At some point it became easier to pretend she wasn't looking, rather than admit how many times she'd tried. Dates that went nowhere. Messages that started with promise and ended with silence. The casual indifference of people who called themselves emotionally available, but vanished at the first sign of depth. She'd gotten good at recognizing red flags. Too good, maybe. So good that she had begun to question even the good things when they showed up. Which made Ethan all the more confusing. He hadn't tried to impress her. He wasn't one of those overly polished guys who talked like they were reading from a dating app script. He asked questions, listened closely, didn't flinch when she shared something real. The first time they met was through a friend of a friend's birthday dinner, and she almost didn't go. But there he was, quiet, observant, with the kind of presence that didn't demand attention but held it anyway. They started texting the next day, not the rapid-fire, all-day chaos of infatuation, but slow, steady exchanges. Little things, thoughts from books, photos of coffee cups, a joke about how Maya never remembered to charge her phone. She found herself thinking about him more than she admitted to herself. And when he asked her out a week later, she didn't hesitate. Their first date wasn't perfect. It rained. The restaurant forgot their reservation. She spilled water on herself, but somehow none of it mattered. They laughed through the awkwardness, shared stories over pizza on a park bench. And when he walked her to her door, he didn't lean in. He just smiled and said, "I'd really like to see you again." She said yes. Now, 6 weeks later, things felt safe, gentle, familiar in a way that didn't scare her. Ethan wasn't intense or overwhelming. He didn't make grand promises, but he showed up, called when he said he would, remembered details. Maya started letting herself believe that maybe, this time, she wasn't being naive. So when her best friend Lena invited her to a small get-together at her place, Maya didn't think twice. She'd bring Ethan, introduce him to her closest friend. Let the worlds blend a little. It felt like the natural next step. "Are you sure?" Ethan had asked when she told him. "Yeah," Maya said, brushing her hair into a low bun. "Lena's like my sister. If I like someone, she usually has to approve." He laughed softly. "No pressure then," she smiled. "You'll be fine. She's easy to talk to." They arrived a few minutes late. Lena opened the door with a wine glass in hand and a wide grin. "Finally," she said, pulling Maya in for a hug. "And this must be Ethan." Maya turned, ready to make the introduction. But something flickered. In the half-second it took Ethan to extend his hand and Lena to reach for it, Maya saw it. The pause. The glance. The something. It was gone just as quickly as it had appeared. Lena smiled. Warm, genuine, curious. Ethan said, "Nice to meet you," and it sounded perfectly normal. But Maya's brain had already captured the moment. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Lena and back again, trying to understand what had just passed between them. Dinner was light and loud. Other friends came. Stories overlapped. Maya kept telling herself she was imagining things, that she was being paranoid, that she was projecting some old insecurity onto a perfectly ordinary moment. But every now and then she caught it again. A glance, a too quick laugh, a subtle shift in posture when one entered the room and the other was already there. By the end of the night, Maya's head was buzzing with questions she had no words for. Ethan offered to help Lena with the dishes, and Maya forced herself to stay seated. When she finally got up and joined them, Lena was drying a glass while Ethan was handing her another. Their conversation stopped when she walked in. Maya smiled, forced. "You guys good in here?" "Yeah," they said at the same time. Too fast, too smooth. Later in the car, Ethan turned to her at a red light. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, just tired." "You sure?" She hesitated. Then said, "You and Lena." Have you met before? Ethan looked surprised. No. Why? Maya shrugged. I don't know. It just felt like there was something familiar. He shook his head. First time. Promise. She nodded again. But the weight in her chest didn't lift. She looked out the window, wondering why her instincts always kicked in when it was already too late. The next morning, Maya sat at her kitchen counter, a cup of black coffee in her hands, watching sunlight stretch across the tiled floor. She hadn't slept well. Not because of anything Ethan had done, but because of everything she had felt, or thought she felt. She kept playing it over in her mind. The way Lena smiled, the way Ethan had hesitated before answering her question in the car, the silence that suddenly felt louder when she walked into the kitchen. She told herself it was nothing. She wanted it to be nothing. But the body remembers things long before the mind can rationalize them away. And something about the night had pressed on a part of her that hadn't been touched in years. Maya had known Lena since college. They met during their freshman orientation, both lost, both pretending not to be. They had shared apartments, heartbreaks, inside jokes, and more bottles of wine than either would admit. If there was one person in the world Maya trusted without question, it was Lena. And yet, something felt off. She picked up her phone, hesitating before tapping out a message. Thanks for last night. Everyone seemed to have a good time, Lena replied within a minute. It was great. Ethan's really sweet. And funny. You two look happy together. It should have comforted her. Instead, Maya felt the chill of a sentence. That was a little too polished. A little too careful. Later that afternoon, Maya met Ethan for lunch. He showed up with 2 coffees, hers with oat milk, no sugar, just how she liked it. He kissed her on the cheek, asked about her morning, and didn't once bring up the dinner party. She waited for him to say something, anything about Lena. But he didn't. She almost admired how normal he could make everything feel. Over their food, she asked casually, "So, what did you think of Lena?" He smiled. "She's cool, smart. You two have known each other a long time, huh?" "Since college." He nodded. "You seem really close." There was nothing in his tone to question. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that every word was calibrated. Just enough curiosity to sound genuine. Just enough distance not to raise alarm. She smiled back. "Yeah, she's basically family." The conversation moved on. Weekend plans. A new series he wanted to show her. Things that should have made her feel connected. But Maya kept feeling like she was floating just outside the moment. As if watching someone play the role of her boyfriend instead of actually living it. That night, she didn't sleep again. By Sunday, the doubt had turned into restlessness. She tried to distract herself, cleaned out her closet, rearranged bookshelves, even alphabetized her spice rack. But every quiet moment felt like an invitation for her brain to circle back to that dinner. So she did something she didn't want to admit she'd been considering. She opened Lena's Instagram and started scrolling. Nothing unusual. Photos of brunches, a gym selfie, a blurry sunset captioned mood, and then, tucked into her stories from the night of the dinner, a video. It was short. Less than 10 seconds. A pan across the table, everyone laughing. Maya could hear her own voice in the background. And at the end, just before the clip cut out, the camera landed, briefly, on Ethan. He was smiling at someone. Not her. Lena was holding the phone. Her stomach tightened. It wasn't proof. Not really. But it was enough to make her close the app and sit in silence for several minutes, the air in her apartment suddenly heavier. That evening, Maya got a message from Ethan. "Hey, want to come over tomorrow night?" "I'll cook." She stared at it, then typed, "Sure. Can I ask you something first?" "Of course." "Are you sure you and Lena have never met before?" This time it took longer for him to respond. "I'm sure. Why?" "I don't know, just something felt familiar. That's all. I promise I don't know her. But I get it. If something feels off, you can always talk to me." Maya stared at the message. There it was again. That perfect tone. Supportive. Kind. Reassuring. She could almost hear his voice saying it. And still, it didn't sit right, because that was the thing about lies. The good ones don't sound wrong. They sound exactly like what you want to hear. She didn't reply. She turned off her phone and stared at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time she had felt sure of anything. Maya didn't cancel dinner with Ethan. She thought about it, typed out the message twice, then deleted it. Not because she felt better, but because she needed to see it for herself. She needed to be in the same room with him one more time, just to feel what her intuition had been whispering for days. That something about the way he smiled wasn't as clean as it seemed. That the silence between his words was saying more than the words themselves. She arrived at his apartment at 7:12. He opened the door in a gray t-shirt, barefoot, the smell of roasted garlic in the air. "Perfect timing," he said with that same easy warmth that used to comfort her. Now it felt like static, familiar but unsettling. The apartment was clean, casual, curated. A vinyl record played something soft in the background. The lights were low. Maya took off her jacket and draped it over the back of a chair. "Smells amazing," she said. He smiled. "You haven't even tasted it yet." They sat at the small round table by the window. 2 plates, cloth napkins, a candle between them. He served the pasta with a quiet pride, like someone who wanted to impress but didn't want to admit it. For the first few minutes, conversation flowed easily. Work updates, weekend plans, some joke about how bad Maya was at finishing books once she hit chapter 12. But under the laughter, there was a current pulling at her ribs. She watched him closely. The way he reached for his glass. The pauses between his sentences. The ease with which he said, "I've missed you," even though it had only been a day. And then she asked without warning, "What do you do when you feel like you're being lied to?" Ethan looked up mid-bite, blinked, swallowed. "That's a heavy one," he said with a small laugh. "I'm serious." He tilted his head. "Is this about work?" "No." He nodded slowly, set his fork down. "Are you okay?" "I don't." "No," she said honestly. He leaned forward. "Maya, if something's bothering you, I'd rather you just ask me." She hesitated. Her heart beat like a warning bell in her chest. "Have you ever met Lena before that night?" A pause. Too short to be guilt? Too long to be nothing? "No," he said. "I already told you. I hadn't." You hesitated. "I didn't." He gave a soft laugh. "You're just nervous. I get it. You've said it before. You have trust issues." Her stomach turned. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Soft, caring, gentle, and completely loaded. "You think I'm making this up?" she asked. "I think," he said carefully, "that maybe you're overthinking. You said yourself Lena is like a sister to you. It makes sense that you'd be protective." Maya looked down at her plate. She hadn't touched the food. The candle flickered between them like it was listening. "I saw the way you looked at each other," she said. "What are you accusing me of?" "I'm not accusing you, I'm asking you." He leaned back, crossed his arms. "You want me to say I've met her? That there's some secret between us? Because there's not. But you're acting like someone who's afraid of being found out." Ethan's face tightened, just for a second, then relaxed. "I think you want to believe something's wrong because things are going too well." That was when she stood up. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't knock over the chair. She just stood, slow and quiet, and walked toward the window, looked out at the street 3 floors below, let the silence stretch. "You know what's worse than being lied to?" she asked without turning around. Ethan didn't respond, feeling crazy for sensing it. She turned then, met his eyes. He didn't flinch, but he didn't smile either. "I'll ask you one more time," she said. "Have you met Lena before?" A breath, then he said, "Once, a long time ago." There it was, the confession. He said, it like it was nothing, like it was a technicality, like the truth had just slipped out of his mouth by accident. Maya stared at him. "When?" "A party. Years ago. I didn't think it mattered." "And it didn't come up?" "Not even after." "You saw her." He looked away. "I didn't know how to bring it up." "You didn't know how to bring it up," she repeated quietly. Silence. Then he said, "We hooked up. One time. That's it." Maya felt everything inside her go still. Not because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do. He had looked her in the eyes in the car. Said, "Promise." He had smiled at Lena like they shared something unspoken. He had lied, and not because he had to, but because he didn't think he'd get caught. Maya didn't cry. Not that night. She thought she might. She waited for it. That familiar flood that usually followed disappointment. But instead, what came was stillness. Cold, precise stillness. Like something had snapped into focus, not broken apart. Ethan stood in the kitchen, watching her from behind the counter. His hands rested on the edge of the sink like he wasn't sure whether to move toward her or stay exactly where he was. He had just confessed to sleeping with her best friend. A long time ago, he said, once, casually, like it had no relevance to anything anymore. But to Maya it wasn't just the act, it was the omission. The silence that had stretched between them like a lie wearing polite shoes. "I didn't know how to bring it up," he said again, as if repetition would soften the betrayal. "You didn't know how to bring it up," she repeated, her voice calm. "But you had no trouble meeting her eyes like it didn't matter." "I didn't mean to lie," he said. "You did lie. Repeatedly. You looked me in the face and said you'd never met her. It wasn't like that. Then tell me how it was." Ethan shifted, rubbed the back of his neck. "It was a party. College. We barely knew each other. It didn't last more than a night. I didn't even realize it was the same Lena until she opened the door." "That's not true." He looked at her. "You recognized her the second you saw her. I saw it on your face." You paused. She paused. "I felt it. And you just went along with it." He didn't respond. Maya walked to the edge of the table, picked up her phone. The screen lit her face in the low light. "I'm going to ask you something," she said, still not looking at him. "And I want the truth, Ethan." He nodded slowly. "Why didn't either of you say anything?" He hesitated. "I thought it would ruin what we had, and I didn't think she'd bring it up either." "She didn't," Maya said, nodding. "You were both right." Ethan moved toward her. "Maya, please. It didn't mean anything." "Then, why did you hide it?" "Because I liked you, and I didn't want you to look at me like you're looking at me right now." She met his eyes. "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to pretend honesty was optional." A silence fell between them that felt like the end of something, though neither of them had said the word. "I should go," she said finally. He nodded. "Can we talk tomorrow?" She walked past him, grabbed her coat. "I don't think tomorrow is the problem, Ethan." Outside, the air bit at her skin. The city was quieter than usual, or maybe her mind was just louder. She walked 3 blocks without thinking. Her legs knew where she was going before she did. Lena answered the door in an oversized sweater, her eyes widening at the sight of her. "Maya, we need to talk." She stepped inside before Lena could say anything else. The apartment smelled like tea and something faintly floral. Maya stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed. "You didn't tell me." Lena closed the door, slowly. "I didn't know how." "You had 2 hours at that dinner. And every day since. Why didn't you say something?" Lena looked down. "Because it didn't mean anything. It was so long ago." "That's not the point." "I know. No, I don't think you do." Lena looked up, Her eyes were wet now. "I didn't want to mess this up for you. You were so happy, and it was nothing. It was a stupid night, years ago. We barely even remembered each other. You remembered him. You looked at him like you did, and then you said nothing while I sat there introducing the two of you like an idiot." Maya's voice cracked on the last word. Her hands clenched at her sides. "I was going to tell you," Lena said, "but every time I tried, it felt worse." "So, you said nothing and hoped I wouldn't notice?" Lena didn't respond. Maya sat down on the edge of the couch, staring at the floor. "It wasn't about what happened. I could have handled that. I could have processed that. What I can't handle is knowing that both of you looked me in the eyes and let me believe something false." Lena sat down across from her slowly. "I messed up." "Yeah," Maya said softly. "You did." They sat in silence for several long minutes. Finally, Maya stood up. "I don't know what I'm doing with him, but I needed to hear it from you. Even if it was late," Lena nodded. "I'm sorry." "I know." At the door, Maya paused. "You could have told me. I would have understood." "I was scared you wouldn't." Maya looked at her. "I would have understood a mistake, but not silence." She left without another word. That night, she lay in bed fully dressed, eyes wide open. Her mind didn't race. It wandered. She thought about how people say things like, "It meant nothing," when what they really mean is, "I didn't want it to matter." She thought about how many things in life go unsaid, not because they're unspeakable, but because they're inconvenient. And she thought about trust, not as something earned, but something handed over piece by piece, until someone forgets they're holding it. She turned over, faced the wall, and whispered to the dark, "Let them keep the silence. I'll keep the truth." Maya didn't see either of them for a week. She ignored Ethan's calls, let Lena's messages pile up unread. Her phone became a small museum of apologies, exhibits in the gallery of betrayal. She didn't reply, not because she was angry, but because she had nothing left to ask. They had already said everything in the moments they chose silence over truth. In that week, Maya rediscovered a quiet she hadn't known she missed. She walked alone, ate alone, slept with the windows open, letting in the night air like it could sweep out what had stayed too long. She journaled for the first time in months, made coffee slowly, let herself fall into a rhythm that had nothing to do with anyone else's story. One afternoon, while rearranging books on her shelf, she found a note Ethan had written her weeks earlier. It was tucked between pages of a poetry collection he had borrowed and returned. The handwriting was familiar, steady. It read, "I don't know where this is going, but I want to find out with you." Maya folded the note, held it in her hand for a moment, and then slid it into a drawer without ceremony. Later, that day, she called Lena. "I'm not ready to be friends again," Maya said, "but I'm ready to not hate you." Lena was quiet for a long time. Then, "I'll wait," Maya nodded, though no one could see it. "Don't wait, just live, like I'm doing." The next evening, she met Ethan at a park bench, their halfway point. They hadn't spoken since the night of his confession. He looked tired, like someone who had rehearsed too many versions of the same apology. She sat down beside him, hands in her coat pockets. "I'm not here to fix it," she said. "I know. I just wanted to understand what part of me you thought couldn't handle the truth." Ethan looked at her. "It wasn't about you." "That's the problem." He nodded. "I messed up. You both did. I wish I could go back." "You don't need to," she said. "We're already somewhere else." A silence passed between them. Not tense, not warm, just final. "I don't hate you," Maya said. "I don't deserve that," he replied. "It's not about what you deserve," she said gently. "It's about what I refuse to carry." They stood up together. No hug, no promise of staying in touch. just a shared acknowledgement that something had been real, and then it wasn't. Maya walked away first. That night, for the first time in weeks, she slept through the night. The dreams didn't come. The questions stopped asking themselves, and in the quiet, she felt something shift, not in the world, but inside her. A kind of release, not forgiveness, not forgetfulness, just space for something new, something hers. She opened her windows again, let in the cold, made tea, turned on music, cleaned her kitchen, wrote 3 pages in her journal without stopping. At the bottom of the 3rd page, she wrote something she hadn't expected. Some people walk into your life to remind you what you no longer need to wait for. And beneath it, I trust myself now. She didn't mean it like a declaration. It wasn't loud or defiant. It was quiet. A whisper spoken only to herself. A truth she didn't have to prove to anyone. The next morning, she walked to the same coffee shop where she and Ethan had their first date. She ordered the same drink, sat at the same table, looked out the window at a world that hadn't changed, but somehow felt new. And when a stranger sat down across from her by mistake, she smiled. Not because she was ready, not because she needed someone else, but because she had finally made room for herself. She never brought up Lena again. She never answered Ethan's last message, but she did answer herself, finally, fully. And sometimes, that's the only closure we ever get, and the only one we truly need.